Hi.
She did note that the meeting facilitator can read her statement, so.
Would she like the meeting facilitator to read her statement?
That's what she noted, yeah.
Okay, we will do that.
Do you want me to read it? Okay.
Please.
Please support additional funding for direct support workers that would increase the starting wage to pay $18 an hour, the work they do. And then that's all I see in the statement. That's all I see in the statement. I don't know if she's online, if she wants to add an additional comment.
Rosemary, if you are online and you wish to add to that comment, please feel free. Okay, there is a second opportunity at the end of this meeting for public comment. So if there are others that are in the audience or wish to have public comment then, please sign up. There are directions with the meeting notice to get yourself registered for that. Thank you so much. And we do appreciate public feedback. So we welcome it. Next item on the agenda is board member service recognition. And I am going to turn the floor over to our CEO, Dana Lazenby.
Thank you. Good evening. Dana Lazenby, CEO. We want to recognize our previous board member, Ms. Hadass Bernard, and just to say a few words about her. Hadass is a fierce and loyal advocate for people living with disabilities in Oakland County. As an OCHN board member, she asks tough questions for all of the right reasons to ensure that people we serve were getting the very best services so they can lead their lives, their best lives. Her experience in commercial real estate was especially helpful during our conversations about building renovations and use. Again, always making people her first priority. Although we wish her well and we wish she could have stayed with us, and she's no longer with our board, we're grateful for the time she dedicated to OCHN and our community, and we wish her well in her future endeavors. So we want to thank you, and we have something for you, I believe. Where's Christine? Oh, you have it. So again, thank you. We're not sure if you want to come up and say a few words. You may. So I'll turn it back over to our chair.
And before I hand you this wonderful token of our appreciation, I just wanted to take a minute and say thank you as well. You are our vice chair. You helped keep us on an even keel, and I very much appreciated that and your time served with us.
Crazy. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I mean, this is really, really outstanding. I really appreciate your words and your thoughts, and I think all of you know how much I appreciated so much working with all of you in this board, and you're all amazing, and I really appreciate and love the time that you give to the board and to the community, and thank you so much. I'm really kind of overwhelmed, and it was my honor being on this board, and I just encourage everybody to keep asking the tough questions, because that's how we do things, and thank you so much for your leadership.
We're so glad.
Really, really beautiful. Thank you so much.
No,
Very, very
it is
kind
very
of you.
necessary.
No, whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Are there other comments from board members? Okay, I recognize you.
So I just wanted to congratulate Hadass for all of her hard work, the 3 years that she served on the board. When I got reappointed, I started with her, and you know, her knowledge, her understanding of the finances, and just her astuteness of all matters that were on our board packet, and questions that she asked were always appreciated. And like Dana said, asking all of the right questions. Your hard work on the bylaws committee, you were just instrumental in moving that along and helping us, get to the point that we're at, and it's still an agenda item tonight, so we're moving through it, but we're almost there, and, you were a big part of that, getting through all those meetings that we did over the year, so, just thank you for the seriousness, the understanding, and I think the hard work that you put in during your time on this board. We appreciate it.
We'll get through it, but thank you. Other board members? Well, you're safe from having to make further comment. Thank you again, Hadass. Okay, next on the agenda are my favorite part of every one of these meetings. It's the stories that inspire hope, optimism, self-sufficiency, and they strengthen us. So I really appreciate it. And tonight, we've got Chaka McDonald, who's no stranger to this board or to the organization. Chaka, welcome tonight. And it also says Trish, but I don't see Trish. Okay. Well, if you'd like to present Trish, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight in person. I just wanted to let you know we did have an individual served who was unable to make it. So huge thanks to Chaka for being able to step in. And I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me tonight to talk about such an important issue as PTSD and how it relates to the society at large. When we think PTSD, we always associate with the veteran community, which is so very true. And at the same time, PTSD affects so many folks in society. So what is PTSD? So post-traumatic stress disorder is a psychiatric disorder that may occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event. These events can be, but are not limited to, natural disasters, serious accident, a terrorist act, war, combat, rape, or anyone that may have been threatened with death, sexual violence, or serious injury. So even as you see in that description there, that could be anyone that experienced a traumatic event in their lives. PTSD can occur in all people of any ethnicity, nationality, or culture, and at any age. PTSD affects approximately 3.5% of U.S. adults every year, and an estimated 1 in 11 will be diagnosed with PTSD in their lifetime. Women are twice as likely as men to have PTSD. 3 ethnic groups in the U.S. that have a higher propensity of facing PTSD are Latinos, African Americans, and Native Americans, and they are disproportionately affected and have higher rates of PTSD than non-Latino whites. So what are some behavior traits of PTSD? So people with PTSD have intense, disturbing thoughts and feelings related to their experience that last long after the traumatic event has ended. Many may relive the event through flashbacks or nightmares. They may feel sadness, fear, or anger, and they may feel detached or estranged from other people. People with PTSD may avoid situations or people that remind them of the traumatic event. And they may have strong negative reaction to something as ordinary as a loud noise or an accidental touch. So we know that as the 4th of July is coming up, you'll see more, public service awareness about loud bangs, loud noises, things like that, that can be traumatic to many of our folks that are in, folks that were veterans or served prior in the military. Post-traumatic stress disorder. So PTSD is brought on by traumatic events and is the result of the brain trying to shield itself from harm. So the brain has its own function where it's trying to protect itself. So PTSD can change your mood, sleep patterns, risk-taking behaviors, hypervigilance, and result in angry outbursts. Some people experience nightmares, flashbacks, memories, and have difficulty relaxing or sleeping. And people may also experience guilt, shame, or self-blame or blaming of someone else. 67% of 30 million veterans in the United States report PTSD, and that's non-combat, peacetime, various occupations within the military. Symptomology of PTSD, so intrusive thoughts such as repeated involuntary memories, distressing dreams, flashbacks of the traumatic event. Avoiding reminders of the traumatic event may include avoiding people, places, activities, objects, situations that may trigger distressing memories. Alterations in cognition and mood, so the inability to remember important aspects of the traumatic event. So folks may actually forget, just even subconsciously, that particular aspect of the event, once again, to try to protect themselves. So negative thoughts, feelings leading to ongoing distorted beliefs about oneself. I'm bad, no one can be trusted. Distorted thoughts, the cause or consequence of the event, leading to wrongly blaming themselves or others. Ongoing fear, horror, anger, guilt, or shame. Much less interest in activities previously enjoyed. And this has me, I think one gentleman I was working with was a young Marine, just went in at 17, 18 years old, pretty much grew up in the Marine Corps, and stated when he came back to the States, how everything seemed different. The things that he used to enjoy with his friends, he no longer did. And I let him know that's understandable, because you experience a part of life that many Americans just will not and have not. So that's to be expected, but that's okay. Let's embrace that difference, that change, but let's get you to help so that it's healthy for you. Alterations in arousal and reactivity. So arousal and reactive symptoms may include being irritable and having angry outbursts, behaving recklessly or in self-destructive ways, being overly watchful of one's surroundings in a suspecting way, being easily startled, or having problems concentrating or sleeping. A diagnosis of PTSD requires exposure to an upsetting traumatic event. However, the exposure could be indirect rather than firsthand. PTSD can occur in an individual learning about the violent death of a close family member or friend. It can also occur as a result of repeated exposure to horrible details of trauma, such as police officers exposed to details of child abuse cases. I had a prior history in law enforcement, understand that many times our law enforcement community, it could be a thankless job, and you're seeing parts of life that the average citizen is not. So keeping our law enforcement in mind. Secondary trauma, a form of trauma that a person experiences not due to something that has happened to them directly, but rather due to some indirect connection, secondhand, to a traumatic experience. And as we look at vicarious trauma, that's a process of change resulting from empathic engagement with trauma survivors. So when I thought about that, you're also thinking about your counselors, your social workers, your EMTs, just being a counselor, just talking to someone on a repeated basis about trauma. You can also experience that secondary trauma, that vicarious trauma. So that's something, as working in the behavioral health field, being extremely cognizant of, and doing that self-care is like paramount. Now, moral injury is an aspect of, it's not PTSD, but it's an aspect of trauma that now I'm just starting to hear different folks in the behavioral health settings talk about, primarily initially starting with the VA and then going out into the community. Moral injury is a separate diagnosis from PTSD, but can mirror PTSD. So moral injury is a separate diagnosis and may require a different treatment modality. It can occur when someone witnesses something that contradicts their moral beliefs. It can be an act of omission, betrayal, or of leadership or others in power or peers. Moral injury is the distressing psychological, behavioral, social, and sometimes spiritual aftermath of exposure to such events. So it's not PTSD, it's more of a wounding of the soul that may need a different treatment mechanism. Exposure to traumatic events, a person can have a moral injury and PTSD and not meet the criteria for PTSD. Moral injury can occur, and that's blocking that. But I'm going to drop down where it says traumatic events involving various situations, individuals. So police, paramedics, emergency, EMTs, firemen, and other first responders are at increased risk of moral injury because of their repeated exposure to violence, trauma, and severe injuries as part of their daily work. So there are times when decision must be made or errors in judgment that may lead to the loss of life, which there is much remorse. So moral injury can also occur in community members that experience violence, trauma, sexual assault, or car accidents. Moral injury can occur among healthcare workers. It may occur if they have to make difficult decisions related to life and death or resource allocation, or when they believe they should have been able to save a patient's life, but were not able to do so. In the time of a healthcare crisis, healthcare workers may witness what they perceive to be unjustifiable, unfair acts or policies that may lead to a sense of betrayal. And a quick reference to moral injury, there was a particular gentleman I was speaking to who was getting treatment for PTSD. And this particular gentleman was a veteran, but he was stating some things that indicated that PTSD treatment was not working, that he had a deeper trauma that the PTSD wasn't reaching. So after doing my studying about moral injury and its prevalence, one of the main things was, the great thing was, he was already being treated by a mental health professional, say at the VA, but having to give them a call and say, hey, can you add the moral injury treatment modality to his treatment plan? And they did so. So that was great for them to incorporate the moral injury healing process as well. I believe that is it.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions from board members?
Comment.
Go ahead.
I appreciate that. And I think that one of the things that I think we've learned in today's day and age, that PTSD, a lot of times people just thought of it as prevalent in veterans, but now we're seeing it in kids that have been involved in school shootings. People, like you said, had been involved in some traumatic event, and I work in criminal justice, and I see it all the time in people who come in the court system, domestic violence, all these kinds of things, and very traumatic events. So I think it's very important topic and discussion, and I think maybe I heard about PTSD when I first got involved in the field, 20 years ago or so, and I had just always thought it was with veterans. And then beginning to realize that it affects so many other, and I think it's seeing in children who are involved in these traumatic situations and all these kinds of things. But I think getting the treatment and the help is always the most beneficial for anybody. I mean, it takes time, obviously with anything, it takes time. And I think one of the things that I remember of when learning about PTSD was reading an article when I was working in Detroit back during the Iraq-Afghanistan war. We used to get a lot of veterans that would come into my mental health court, and they would immediately get addicted to opiates, and then they'd move into heroin. And what we started to see was that the younger ones were the ones that were really affected and were turning to the drugs from PTSD. And it was kind of like what you were saying with the veteran, the gentleman was in the Marine Corps at 17. We saw that the younger population, the people that went into the war when they were 18, 19 years old, like literally from prom to boot camp to the war, had a hard time handling life when they came back, as opposed to some of the people who we would see who went to college and were not that old, but maybe 23 or 24 when they joined the military and then went into the war. They handled things much better, but it was just those few years. And I remember reading this article, and they were talking about how just those few years of brain development and experiences and life experiences better equip them for coming back into society. And not that they didn't have PTSD, but being able to manage and to handle things better than some of the others. So, but thank you for the presentation.
Thank you definitely for your commentary and insight into like your life experiences and seeing what your opportunity of seeing those different things. And I'm happy that you brought up the, like, so with the various traumas that are happening now with the various school shootings and things like that, and it's so so apropos to look at PTSD as a national issue, especially dealing with the children. So, thank you definitely for your commentary.
Yes, Dr. Hahn.
Thank you for this important presentation. When I started my career as a physician with VA about 40-some years ago, we were dealing with the generation of Vietnam veterans. I think that generation of veterans was the least served by our service, because of the draft. Some of them enlisted even before the age of 18. And they had no tools, neither the VA nor the community could provide them with all the support that they needed. PTSD has been called different names during different wars. It was always there, starting from the Civil War. But I think I don't know, I'm not very familiar with the history of Civil War, but I know that First World War, it was called shell shock. Second World War, it was lack of anger management. And then after the Korean War, we started seeing a lot of substance use. There was some awareness, but veterans had to self-medicate, and that led to substance use crisis. After the draft was abandoned by our leaders, with the Gulf War, we started to see more of moral trauma, and I'm happy that now it is recognized as a separate entity from PTSD. I remember in the early 2000s, when the veterans started to come back from the first Gulf War, their issues were totally different. We could not talk them into believing something that we thought was the right. They had very valid questions, but we didn't have the answers to that. So thank you for this. I hope that you can make a presentation on moral trauma sometime soon, because now it is impacting our law enforcement and EMT, as you mentioned, and pretty soon it will be in schools and our educators as well, especially now that we are, in some states, we are asking them to be carrying weapons into classroom. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Other board members with comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Chaka, I just wanted to say thank you for you coming to the board and sharing the information, the messaging, and the background with it. I have as well, like Dr. Hans, has seen the different things from shell shock to fatigue, and then the split of PTSD from stress, and now the moral injury. So I'm glad to see that they're recognizing that these are different issues, different situations, sure similar on the face of things, but due to different drivers, stimuli, or situations. So it's tough, and I know there'll be even further evolution with whatever goes on with what's going on with schools and other things, just different places and worlds. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me and allowing me to speak and address this issue.
Okay. Okay. Next on the agenda is Executive Board Chair's report. So I'll make that report. This month, the Executive Committee met on Wednesday, June 1st at 5 p.m. In attendance were our Secretary, Anna Furman, chairs of the Business Ops Committee and Policy, Ms. Naomi Dyer and Ms. Newman, along with Sheila, our support, and Ms. Ali, our Chief Legal Officer. Ms. Lazenby and others were at I believe it was the Mackinac Island Conference. It's been a busy couple of weeks. So with the cancellation of the May 26th study session, and then as well, more recently, the June Committee of the Whole meeting due to other situations and conflicts, we focused on catching up to business as you've seen from tonight's extended agenda. And okay. As well as additional topics for June 30th, next week, Thursday's 5 p.m. study session. So I am hoping, and we're all looking forward to having all of the board members attend next week, Thursday's study session. So we have a lot to cover. We also discussed the CEO evaluation process and timing. With 360 survey results have already gone out to the public, and I believe they may be back in at this point and getting aggregated. At the next week's study session, we'll review those results along with the CEO's self-evaluation. As board members, your board member evaluations will be starting from June 30th that evening, due back on the 12th. And then our CEO evaluation committee plans to meet prior to next month's general board meeting on the 19th. Just want to take a minute and say it's amazing just how much time has flown. This is the second time we're going through review with Dana, so that means you've been here for 2 years, and I just can't believe it's gone that fast. I mean, with everything that slowed us down with the COVID and everything else, it's just been a whirl for this past 12 months, I can tell you that. So I just want to say I think you've done an amazing job, but I am not going to say that outside of the meetings, because that might be a violation of Open Meetings Act, where someone might say, Jonathan's trying to persuade everyone. But I can say it in the meeting. So I think you've done an amazing job, even with the COVID. And I'm sure the board evaluations will reflect your performance and your team and the organization's overall success. For CMHA, I always have something on it. Most recently, was that last week? Yeah, I guess it was. We had the summer conference in Traverse City, June 6th through the 8th. Many staff and board members attended. In attendance from the board was Ms. Malkia Newman, Ms. Sarah May, Ms. Yvette Woodruff. As always, I found the keynotes and many of the breakout sessions quite enlightening, as did the others, because I've talked to each of you and heard a little bit of feedback. Being at the conference gives us all a better opportunity to meet staff and other PIHP and CMH folks in an informal way, gaining insights and building relationships. So I urge other board members to consider attending the fall conference, which is later in October, also up in Traverse City. And the winter one will be out in Kalamazoo in February. Following that conference on the Thursday, so that was a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. On the Thursday, we had the CMHA Metro meeting. It was hosted by Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. It was virtual, and so it followed the conference. It was Thursday night. So some of us were looking forward to hearing the comments from Alan Boulder, but he wasn't able to join due to a family issue. But we also had and heard from our executive directors and staff who shared a number of specific and cross-organizational efforts. And lastly, a final reminder to contribute to the CMH PAC. Both Malkia and I have talked about the value of contributing. Let's be the only CMH or PIHP that donates 100% of board and staff participation. All right? So if you haven't contributed, please look at doing so. And after we covered that, we went into adjournment as we completed our agenda. Any questions? Okay. Next up on the topics, I'm going to pass the baton over to board policies with John Torres. John Paul. Sorry.
Thank you. So you all should have a red line version of the board policies that was given to you tonight by Sheila. So that is the board policies red line. So it indicates all of the changes that we made as a whole board up to the conflict of interest and the code of ethics portion. So that was where we left off at the May 12th special board meeting. And we essentially made it all the way up to those portions. So first, what I'm going to do is ask for a vote to accept the recommended changes as presented. So these were all the changes that were made, and then after Sheila went back through, and I suspect Mr. Hooper and all those others involved, to make sure that the changes were reflective of what we had, and then after that, I will go to the other portions that we still had yet to review, which was the conflict of interest in the code of ethics. So, I guess I should make a motion first, right? And then open it up? Okay. So,
Motion in a second.
All right. So someone else has to make the motion, right?
I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hans. Is there any discussion now?
There is one correction, actually, that I did not mention. So draft revisions, it should say 5/12/22, that red line right there on the first page, as opposed to 4/28/22, because the revisions were made on 5/12 at that special meeting that we had as a board. Aside from that would be it for me.
Okay. So there is a motion, there's been a second, there's been discussion. This is to accept all of the changes that were represented in the document. It is not approval of the bylaws or policies.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on those materials at this point? Then I think because we are at a general board meeting, we will do a roll call vote to approve that motion to accept the changes as represented.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Furman?
Yes.
Dr. Hans?
Yes.
Ms. Newman?
Yes.
Ms. Namie Dyer?
Yes.
Mr. Cowan?
Yes.
Ms. Root?
Yes.
Ms. May?
Yes.
Ms. Woodruff?
Yes.
Mr. Torres?
Yes.
Mr. Landsman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, so now what I'll do is I'm going to go to the page 16 is where we would start, the conflict of interest and the code of ethics. So when we had last left off, a lot of this language was put together, I think, by our team and Mr. Hooper's expertise as well. A lot of it, my understanding, was pretty standard. But I wanted to allow the opportunity for anybody that would need it to review that, those two sections, and if they had any additions or deletions or questions, that they could present those at this time. So it begins on page 16, and that was 16, 17, 18, 19, page 20, and 21. But did anybody have anything in those sections that they wanted to address or change or discuss? I can. Yeah, we can read through them. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go right over to the statement of page 16. Board governance policy, conflict of interest policy. So I'll read through it. After I finish the paragraph, we'll do like we did before. Anybody who has any suggestions or any questions about anything, then we can address it there at that point. So conflict of interest policy, one statement of policy. The Oakland County Health Network, OCHN, operates on the assumption that its directors, officers, committee members, and employees are loyal to the best interests of OCHN, and will conduct themselves as to not violate this principle. It is a policy of OCHN to provide for the fair and equitable treatment of all persons involved in contracting with OCHN, to maximize the purchasing value of funds, and to provide safeguards for maintaining systems of quality and integrity. Board members, officers, committee members, and employees owe a fiduciary duty to OCHN. Each must avoid any impropriety, any action on part of a board member or employees that violates this policy is unethical. Anybody? Does anybody have any questions or anything on to that statement of policy?
Tell me to do the next one.
I can do it. Okay. So I'll go ahead and move over to definitions. So this is just going back and defining some of the terms that are used throughout these sections. So committee member, any member of an OCHN committee. Director, any director of the board of directors of OCHN. Employee, any person directly employed by OCHN. Family member, a spouse or a domestic partner or the following relatives and spouses of such person: child, grandchild, parent, grandparent, brother, sister, half-brother, half-sister. This would include any relationship arising from adoption. It is not necessary to interrogate the members of your family. It is sufficient to disclose facts as you know them. Financial interest, any investment, option, right to purchase stock, personal loans, partnership interest, share in profits, free goods or services or other interest of any nature. Independent contractor, a person or other person or other business entity that provides services to OCHN on a contractual basis. Officer, any officer of OCHN as described in Article 3 of the bylaws. And as I'm reading, if you have anything, just raise your hand and Mr. Landsman will just go ahead and call on you so we can address it. So personal interest, any interest in a contract, action, or decision that the director, officer, committee member, or family member of same will be affected either positively or negatively by such contract, action, or decision to the extent which it is materially different than the effect of other persons in general. Supplier, any person, partnership, trust, corporation, or other business entity which provides goods, materials, real estate, and services, such as brokers, adjusters, attorneys, doctors, medical staff providers, investigators, building contractors, etc., to OCHN for itself or on behalf of its members.
Any comments? Yes, Mr. Furman.
Yes, I just have a question stylistically. Should there be a hyphen at all in between the, a hyphen or a dash between the definition and the term in the beginning of the definition in that section?
Oh, so the term and then that definition, I don't know, they have quotation marks.
But I'm wondering if there needs to be something to set the definition off from the term.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just a matter of personal preference. So.
I wouldn't be against it. I mean,
We okay with that?
yeah, I'm okay with it.
It adds clarity to know
Yeah.
definition between the item and the definition? Okay,
Okay.
so we'll add that.
All right, yep, if we could make that correction, just add that hyphen after every word, after the word, and then onto the definition.
That for a second.
Sure, after every quoted term,
Mm-hmm.
put a hyphen,
Okay.
and then start the
The
definition.
definition, yep.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm gonna move on to standards. So Section A is officers, directors, committee members, and employees will not engage in active outside employment, acquire financial interest, or have a personal interest which interfere with their responsibility and duties to OCHN. Although an outside affiliation may involve no conflict when accepted, care must be taken taken to be alert to any development which may change the situation. When in doubt as to the propriety of a, what is that word? I have a hard time. Propriety, okay. The impropriety, priority. Okay, there we go. When in doubt as to the priority of outside employment or interest arise, the situation must be discussed with Chief Corporate Compliance Officer or the Executive Director of OCHN. The conflict involves the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer, then the situation must be discussed with the Executive Director of OCHN or General Counsel as appropriate. So I believe there should be an if there.
Yeah, I think where it says, or the Executive Director of OCHN, there should be a period, and then a new sentence that says, if the conflict involves the Chief Corporate.
Yeah, that sounds right. If, so period, you see that, Sheila? Okay, and then if the conflict involves the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer, then the situation must be discussed with the Executive Director of OCHN or General Counsel as appropriate. Okay. All right, anybody else on that section? On section B, OCHN disapproves of its officers, directors, committee members, and employees or their family members accepting directly or indirectly for the personal gain any gift, parentheses, other than a normal value in accordance with usual business courtesy, in parentheses, loans, guarantees, or endorsements of loans, goods, or services of substantial value from any person or corporation which does business or seeks to do business with OCHN, including customers and suppliers.
I think that was nominal, not normal.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yes, which is
nominal.
A small token.
Okay. Go ahead, Malachi. And you looking at the third line? Yes. Okay. Employees of their family members accepting directly or indirectly for a personal gain. Yeah, their. Yeah, something about that sentence didn't read right, so yeah, I think that might be it. Their personal gain, any gift, loans, guarantees, or endorsements of loans, goods, or services.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else?
You have that, Sheila? Okay, thanks.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's go to section C. Other than purchasing shares of stock of a publicly owned corporation, which stock is regularly traded on an exchange or over the counter, officers, directors, committee members, or employees will limit their investment or the investment of family members, parentheses, to the best of their ability, in parentheses, in companies with which OCHN may be doing business to less than 10% of such company's net worth. An officer, director, committee member, employee, or family member will not invest in shares or privately owned competing companies or small corporations or partnerships with whom OCHN is actively doing business, such as its suppliers. Anybody on section C?
Yes, Mr. Furman.
Publicly owned, and that first line needs a hyphen?
Where are you at?
At the start of section C, other than purchasing shares of stock of a publicly owned.
Oh, okay. So it should be publicly owned? Okay, all right. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, let me go to D. An officer, director, committee member, or employee shall not divulge to an authorized person, okay, or employee shall not divulge to an unauthorized person confidential information acquired in the course of the officer, director, committee member, employee's duties in advance of time prescribed for its authorized release to the public. Information in OCHN records, files, and Data Systems is owned by OCHN and is confidential. Confidential information received by an officer, director, committee member, or employee in the performance of their official duties or by reason of their position with OCHN may not be divulged nor used for personal profit or gain, nor used in competition with OCHN, nor used to the detriment of OCHN.
Yes, sir, May.
I believe committee and member need to be capitalized.
Oh, okay, so it's, yeah, inconsistent, committee members. So committee members should be consistently capitalized throughout. And then you said, what was the other one? Employee? Did you say?
Oh, I just said committee and member.
Okay, committee member, yep. Yeah, so that would just have to be capitalized throughout.
Yep, because that is a
Yep.
term.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay, let's go to the next section, procedures to follow when a conflict may exist. Okay, Section A. Whenever a director, committee member, family member has a financial or personal interest in a contract, action, or decision, the officer, director, committee member shall so advise the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer. If the matter involves the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer, the officer, director, or committee member shall advise the Board of Directors or committee chair and request to abstain from discussing or voting on such contract action or decision. Such director, committee member, or person with a family member having a financial or personal interest in the matter being considered shall request to abstain from discussing or voting on the matter. So it looks like committee member, that member should be capitalized in the third line from the bottom there. Anybody, anything on that section though from anybody? Makaya?
This reads the same way as that other, statement did. So as far as the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer, period, if the matter involves the Chief Corporate Officer.
If, okay, so you're saying period?
Yeah.
Okay, member shall so advise the chief. If the matter is, yep, I see it. And then, so period, middle of the fourth line, period after compliance officer, uppercase I on if, starting a new sentence. If the matter involves the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer, officer, director, committee member shall advise the board of, okay. All right? Any, okay. Let me know if you want me to repeat it. Yes, 5A. 4A, sorry, 4. Yeah, procedures to follow when a conflict may exist. Got it? Okay. And I'll just keep reading the next paragraph. Such matter shall be subject to a supermajority vote of 2/3 of the director or committee members for approval. The decision of the board of directors or committee and the conflict regarding the matter shall be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. Anybody on that?
Hi.
Oh, go ahead. Mr. Cowan, and then we'll go to Makaya.
Well, the first item is, so is it 2/3 of those in attendance at the meeting or appointed and serving? Because there's a big difference. If you have, that's either all of us,
Right,
and you
yeah.
do the 2/3 from that, or typically, I can just tell you, usually it's the people in attendance at the meeting, because they're the ones making the decisions. And I'd feel comfortable with that, but I think we ought to clarify that.
What do you think, Mr. Hooper?
2/3 of those, present and voting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, 2/3 of those in attendance. There's a supermajority vote of 2/3 of the board of directors or committee members for approval. So in attendance, so where should we stick that? Where would that go?
Such matter shall be subject to a supermajority vote of 2/3 of those board members attending.
The director or committee members. Supermajority vote of the director.
Oh, I'm sorry. 2/3 of the director or committee members in attendance. That
Yeah,
doesn't sound right
in
either.
attendance.
And attendance.
In attendance for approval, so would it be comma for approval? In attendance. Such matters shall be subject to supermajority vote of 2/3 of the director or committee members in attendance. Then, I believe it would be a comma for approval, period.
I think it needs its approval.
For its approval? Okay. So, in attendance, committee members in attendance for its approval. Okay.
It's being the matter that starts the sentence. And I'm going to turn over to Adam,
Okay.
who's our grammatical expert.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you had another thing, Mr. Cowan?
No, that was it.
Oh, that was it,
Thank you.
okay. And then, Melchiah? Such matters, majority vote, 2/3 of the directors. Yeah. Yeah, it should be, right? Yeah, it should be directors, because, board members are the directors, so yes. So, okay, did you get that, Sheila? Okay. Thank you. Section B, let me go to that, in section 4, item B. So, whenever an employee or independent contractor has a financial or personal interest in a contract, action, or decision, the employee or independent contractor shall so advise the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer or the Executive Director of OCHN if the matter involves the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer and shall refrain from participation to whatever extent is necessary to avoid a conflict of interest. You said we need a period?
Yes, where it's Chief Corporate Compliance Officer or the Executive Director of OCHN, period. And a capital if the matter.
Okay. So the fourth line, midway through, okay, and then capitalize if.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it was.
It's a long paragraph.
Yeah, it's a long sentence there too, so that's good, okay. So let me go down keep reading. If the person is the Executive Director of OCHN, the Executive Director shall advise the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer and the Chairperson of the Board of Directors, period. If the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer, Executive Director, or Chairperson of the Board of Directors, as appropriate, determines that the employee does not have a conflict of interest in the matter at issue, then the employee shall not be subject to a charge of misconduct on the basis of the facts which the employee, independent contractor made known as applicable. Okay. Go ahead.
And that should be capitalized independent contractor. It is elsewhere.
Yep. Capitalize independent contractor.
Yep.
Okay.
So I actually don't think we should have put the period earlier, because this paragraph reads differently than the other ones we've been updating. It is a long sentence, so we could look at rewording it, but I don't think that period actually belongs there, because it's saying...
After OCHN, where we put period if?
Right.
Is that what you're looking at? Okay.
Yes, because the sentence, it's basically saying they shall advise the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer or the Executive Director if the matter involves the Chief Corporate Compliance Officer.
I stand corrected.
Okay.
It is a long sentence.
So then we just keep it as a long sentence. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a long sentence, but if it reads right, then it's fine. So then we'll correct that no period, no capitalization of if. Anything else?
Well, that semicolon doesn't make sense then. That's what really throws it off. Adam, help us here. There shouldn't be a semicolon in the middle of a series, right?
You're talking about personal interest in a contract,
I see.
semicolon?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
It
should
seems
probably.
like a contract
And-
action or decision is one unit.
Okay, so we got a comma instead of a semicolon.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's line 2 in section B. You see that, Sheila? Okay. So personal interest in a contract, comma, action or decision, comma, the employee or independent contractor. Okay. Anybody else?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So in subparagraph A, if it's a director or a committee member, that's a matter of public record, and it's voted on by the members at an open meeting. So if it's an employee or independent contractor, there's a different procedure. I'm not advocating that the board get involved, but I believe I'd like to know what the decision was after the decision's made. I don't need to interfere in the decision-making process, but I think the board ought to be advised if there's a conflict or not on a request that's made by an employee or independent contractor. So I would advocate that a copy of the decision would be given to the board after, whenever it's rendered. That would be my suggestion.
So are you suggesting the end of that sentence, that's the last sentence of this, of item B, should be shall issue their determination in writing and provide a copy to the employee and the board members?
Board of Directors.
Board of Directors?
To the employee.
Well, typically, we do not disclose the conflict or potential conflicts to the board because they are usually HR-related matters, and so they're kept private in that regard.
Well, it can't be private for the independent contractor.
Well, for an independent contractor, yes, if you wanted to.
That's not an HR matter.
Disclosure. Right.
No, but none of those issues, I think, all those are disclosable. If a private citizen sent a FOIA request and asked for that information, they'd get it. I don't see a basis for denying that. So why can't the board members be told what is going on in their own organization about a conflict of interest? I think that's rather important.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just.
No, it makes sense.
I've been on other boards where these situations have arisen and the board didn't know anything about it, and then we all got left having to deal with the fallout from it.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest concern. I'm not looking to, I think that information should be treated confidentially. I don't have a problem with that, but I really believe we should get notification of it.
So for an employee, for example, who works at a third party and requests, an approval of their employment at a third party that provides services within our network, if they get approval for that, would you still want that disclosed?
So you're saying it's an employee directly of OCHN?
Yeah.
So if we have a direct employee and they want to go work for one of our, if you want to call it.
So let's say they provide direct care to individuals within the network as well.
But that, if it's a conflict of interest request, to me, no matter how it arises, it should be disclosed to us at some juncture.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so what was the language was proposed to add? Mr. Lansing?
I would just say that at the end, provide a copy to the employee and the board of directors.
So just add "and the board of directors."
And the board of directors.
Yeah, on the last sentence, okay.
Directors, okay. Okay, anything
Thank
else
you.
on that, section?
Yeah, I think Dennis has made an important point because in the past, we were in a situation where the executive director was on one of the core provider agencies' boards, and the board was not made aware of that. So Yes, it's important. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me go to ethical behavior policy. Members of the Board of Directors of the OCHN are expected to behave ethically in consideration of all matters which come before the board. This includes expectations to perform their duties in such a way as to protect the rights, general well-being, and best interests of recipients of the agency's services, actively promote public confidence and maintain positive image in order to pass constant public scrutiny, not accept anything of value from any source which is offered to influence his or her action as a public official, to comply with the ethical standards developed by the board, ensures the environment, procedures, decisions, and behaviors are welcoming, understandable, dignified, respectful, appropriate, flexible, and non-intrusive. Members of the OCHN board commit themselves to conduct their professional relationships in accordance with the mental health code and agree that they shall regard as their primary obligations the welfare of the individual or groups served, shall not discriminate because of race, color, religion, age, sex, national ancestry, disability, or social or economic status, and will work to prevent and eliminate such discrimination in rendering services in work assignments and employment practices, shall give precedence to their professional responsibility over their personal interest, shall hold themselves responsible for the quality and extent of the services that they direct, shall respect the confidentiality of the people they serve, shall not engage in inappropriate activities with persons served by the board, shall treat with respect the findings, views, and actions of colleagues and use appropriate channels to express judgment on these matters, shall accept responsibility to report unethical behavior by any individuals or organizations, shall regard the integrity of other agencies in order to further the interest of the public. Okay, go ahead, Malachi.
Where it talks about shall not discriminate, shouldn't gender be included in that as well, and not just sex?
What was that? Oh, okay, yeah, I agree.
So the wording would be sex,
Sexual-
gender, or sexual?
Sexual orientation? Sexual orientation, okay. Economic ancestry, disability, or social or economic status. Sex, national ancestry, disability. So it'd just be after disability, we could say, sexual orientation, and then, or social or economic status, and we'll work to prevent, okay. And
I think we should add ethnicity along with race.
Yep. Yeah. Race and ethnicity are different.
And sex and gender identification.
Sexual orientation, so gender, you said gender identification, should we?
Yeah, I don't know, will that be appropriate term?
Okay. Sexual orientation, gender identification, okay. Okay, so we'll go ancestry, disability, sexual orientation, what was it? Gender. Gender or yeah, gender or transgender status. So it would be after sexual orientation, comma, gender or transgender status. transgender status. And then, okay, yep, good idea. So, and then when we go up to shall not discriminate because of race or ethnicity, or we could say race, comma, ethnicity, race. Yeah, you could say race, I don't know, should we say race or ethnicity, or race, comma, ethnicity? Comma, okay. Comma, ethnicity, and then color, religion, so on.
Can I read that back to you?
Yes.
Shall not discriminate because of race, ethnicity, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender, or transgender status, national ancestry, disability, or social or economic status, and then goes from there.
We'll work to prevent you. That sounds good to me. Okay. All right, go ahead, Jonathan.
Is there anything else to be added as another bullet? Okay.
I think that's it then. That would cover. So then, Sheila will be able to make the changes, redline it. Okay, so you already did that. Okay, so then we would just have to, then, approve the red line, and then we've already approved the bylaws, so then just approve the formal, go ahead. Oh, is it Mel, did you have something, okay? Okay, go ahead.
We talk about, respecting, staff, person served, but we don't have any reference to respecting each other. And I think we should include that somewhere.
Can I know?
What's that? Yeah, that's what I was looking for, that section. Where's that section at?
It's third to last.
Okay, shall treat with respect the findings, views, and actions of colleagues and use appropriate channels to express judgment on these matters. Yeah.
Ms. Lazenby.
At the last meeting, I was asked to look at the vision statement, and I will engage the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Council, to do that with the facilitation support of Ms. Lois Schulman. She actually is the lead for that meeting, so I think it's important to have persons serve input on any changes we would make to our vision statement. So I just wanted to give you an update on that part.
Okay. So I think from a process perspective, while most of the rest of this has been redlined, we have to wait for the outcome of the change from that policy, from the mission statement. Once we have that, then we need, under the current bylaws, don't we have to distribute these for the board to review, and then at our next board meeting, we could approve the items put into there, and then we'd actually have to approve both bylaws and policies? If I understand the process? Please.
The process allows for 5 days for viewing. So once you see the new red line, then you're allowed to review them for 5 days after. But I do noting Ms. Lazenby's comment about enacting the CAC. I don't know if the board wants to move forward as presented, and then when they adapt that change of the vision statement to make that change.
When is the next the committee meeting?
Just had it. It's not till July after that board meeting.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, 'cause it was just last week, so we have to wait till July.
So is it the board's will to retain the current mission, vision, and values to approve the bylaws and policies at this time. And when that comes through, we would then consider those changes as well separately, or wait and enact all of this at the August board meeting.
So they meet in July. We would, the next time we would have an opportunity to approve the red line of what the changes that we've made tonight would be when?
I want to note they meet in July, doesn't mean they'll come up with the recommended changes in July.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be a little bit of process for the CAC to do that. That's why if you're looking to get these adapted changes sooner than that, it could be a couple months process for the CAC.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, what's people's thought on that? I just, my only concern is I just want to keep moving things along, not to push things through, but just to make sure that we stay on track so that all the hard work that we've done, you know, the process does move through. I don't want to get in a situation where we, you know, leave it aside for a few months and then we come back to it and then it's, you know, we're kind of re-looking at it and rehashing everything. So I just want to make sure, but I also want to respect it, you know, have as much input as we can on our vision and any piece of it.
May I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I know that I believe that originally the vision statement and the mission were not part of the bylaws, I believe, and that we added those as we went through the process. It is plausible for us to accept the bylaws as they are and to select and to accept the mission, vision, and value statement separately once it is approved.
Yes, Dr. Hahn.
I strongly believe that the mission and vision should be part of this document, and as Jonathan suggested, that when the new mission and vision is finalized, which may take some time, the process may take some time to be finalized, we can either make an amendment at that time.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I go along with Mr. Cooper. I see the vision sits over everything. I mean, so I agree with what you said, John. Let's move forward with policies. I think we need those updated, and then let the vision take as long as it needs.
And then just come back later and,
I
amend it if the vision changes. Okay.
My guess is it probably will, and that's fine, but it's mission and vision are overarching statements. Policies, we get down into the weeds.
Anybody else?
Okay, so it sounds like the work of the bylaws committee is wrapped up. I appreciate all of the folks that have put in their time and effort into that. Yes, Sheila?
So I do think for procedural purposes, we can have the recommendation from the bylaw committee, once these red lines are reviewed again, to move forward for the approval. So I don't know if you guys want to meet a half hour before one meeting, review them, and then, or an hour before one meeting.
Yeah.
But procedural, you guys will have to make the recommendation to the board, and correct me if I'm wrong, if that's, but then, and then to go for full board approval, so.
So first we want to, as a committee, agree to the red line recommendations, submit it to our board. They adopt the red line recommendations, and then we would move forward with the full approval at a board meeting of the board policies and procedures.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So when would be the earliest that we could bring, as a committee, we could put forth the red line recommendation to the board?
If you're looking at approval, I already did the red line as we were going through them, so they are complete. So, but I would like me and Mr. Hooper to meet and make sure that they are complete. And then, we can move them to the committee for your review, and then we can put them on the board agenda. Or you can do the July cow for a final review, and then put them on the board agenda. You can recommend for that committee approval at the July cow meeting, for board approval at the July meeting.
So then our July cow meeting, we actually have 3 different committees.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, we could do that. Everybody's okay with that?
I'm seeing heads nod, yes.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So that's the action plan, complete the red line.
Mm-hmm.
Committee of the whole, the bylaws committee can review that and vote to, if they choose to report out.
Okay.
And then that would give us the sufficient timeline to have it on the agenda for the July general board meeting.
For approval. Okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Again, thank you for the effort for the whole board and for those that are watching us from elsewhere. This is just a small sampling of what we do when we're in our committee work. This particular committee has worked on what I would say is probably the better part of 10 months to review and update the bylaws and the policies. It's not always pretty. Tonight it was actually pretty calm. But it's a tough effort to get the words just right. We do read through it all. And I say we, and I was not on this committee, but they read it word for word to make sure that it is the spirit as well as the wording to reflect what we are hoping to do. So, next item on our agenda would be our April financial review with our CFO, Anya Eliason.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to walk you through April financials. For note, there's a couple of things you need to be aware of for April is that it does not yet include budget amendment number 2. So you'll see revenues slightly off from what we most recently reviewed in budget amendment number 2. And also, I mentioned during the review of budget amendment number 2 that we will begin to accrue the amount of money that will have to go back to the department for the direct care wage funding and CCBHC funding that we're not able to use. So just brief history on that, reason being there's a lot of restrictions on the direct care wage funding, so we can only push it out as they've identified. And then CCBHC, there will be a reconciliation process for the number of people we were paid for versus the number of payments we pushed through. So all of that being said, you're looking at the fiscal year 22 revenue. You can see it's relatively flat. You can see that slight little increase there in May. That's what we should expect for the remainder of this year, or at least for as long as the emergency order is in place. If anything, it could go up very minimally, but I don't expect it to go up much at this point. Just a few people here and there that will continue to be added to the Medicaid or Healthy Michigan enrollment. Next slide, please. So this ties directly to that first slide as it relates to eligibility. You can see eligibility is now roughly flat. I don't expect us to see any large increases or decreases until that emergency order ends. That is definitely on the actuary's radar for fiscal year 23, knowing that we should start to see people fall off relatively quickly once that ends, just because people haven't had to do redeterminations. Spend down hasn't been a thing for the last 2.5 years. So all of those things will come back into play, so it'll be really important for people to be updating all of their applications and spend downs being processed, and all of that stuff will go back into play as soon as that emergency order ends. So here you're looking at assets compared to the end of fiscal year 21 versus April. So you can see our cash and investments are up, receivables are down, other assets are minimal, and then capital assets continually go down with depreciation. Liabilities, again, compared from the end of fiscal year 21, liabilities are down significantly from a vendor payables perspective. Due to state is relatively flat. Employee payables and the long-term debt is relatively flat. So net position, again, this is compared to the end of fiscal year 21. You can see our total assets have gone down, but our total liabilities have gone down by more. So that makes our net position still positive for this period of time. So this chart is looking at year over year, so April of last year compared to April of this year. So you can see our revenue is up. CCBHC wasn't a thing this time last year, so you can see 10 million of CCBHC revenue. That's specific to the supplemental revenue that we get for CCBHC that is above and beyond the capitation payment. Behavioral health home, you can see, has tripled since this time last year, and that's entirely due to enrollment. General fund is just slightly up. I apologize, that's a child calling me. General fund is just slightly up because the state had a little extra money, and they did push out a small, I think it was around $400,000 to us this fiscal year. County funds remains flat, and all other is roughly the same. So this one is administration. Last time, or this year, no, this time last year, we're slightly up in administration due to the adjustments in salaries and the added positions you've been made aware of. In addition to that, provider expenses are up pretty significantly, but again, we planned for that related to not only the increase in direct care wage hourly rates, but also we adjusted manager and supervisor employees accordingly. In addition to that, we did an adjustment to master's level social workers to bring them up to market value. So we did expect this increase, so it is going as planned. You can see grants are roughly the same, as well as all others roughly the same too. So that pulls us into net income comparison from last year this time to this year this time. I'm struggling with that tonight. So total revenue is up. Total expenses are also up. So what that means is when we look at last year compared to this year, our net income is lower because we have had an increase in expenses and an increase in revenue, but not more than expenses. Our top 15 providers paid this month and the amounts associated with them. And with that, I can take any questions.
Yes, Malkai.
You had mentioned that once the moratorium is over and people start dropping off, is there any way we could start the enrollments earlier?
So unfortunately, you can't re-enroll someone until their re-enrollment date, but that is something that is housed, I believe, in our electronic medical record as of when the re-enrollment date is, but until it's going to expire, you can't actually redo it. So as soon as we're made aware of when that date will be that ends, then we'll be able to start to prepare and remind providers that they will have to get back on that. That is something we do have an incentive built in for all of the people that they get enrolled or get enrolled from Healthy Michigan to Medicaid, to full Medicaid. So we'll probably have to do some sort of provider bulletin just to keep reminding people when we have the actual date of the emergency order ending, to start getting people ready to do that again, just more frequently than they've been had to the last couple of years.
Is the process to re-enroll, is that all electronic, or do they do paper forms?
You know, that's a good question. I know that I think it's all electronic now, but I'm guesstimating here. But we also, remember, have 3 MARA workers who we employ. We use general fund to cover to help with those processing those applications and with any spend out. So we will get with them again, and then also make sure we're reminding providers that that has to be started as soon as the emergency order ends.
The reason I ask, if they're doing paper forms, couldn't they fill out the forms and just hold them to the date?
They probably could, except for the fact that if any of your income changes, your address, if there's anything that changes, I mean, I don't necessarily know that that would, but we can certainly recommend that if they are doing paper. I guess I really hope that they're not doing paper at this point, but that doesn't mean they aren't.
Right, okay.
Yep.
And then I had, another question about the pilot that we were doing with the wages. Is that over?
Nope, we just extended that for the remaining 6 months. So it started in December, and we just extended it, so it will be a full year. So we've just now got 6 months worth of time in. So as soon as we have all of that data collected for the first 6 months, we'll run some numbers and see what we can see, and grab the baseline information from prior to that start, to start to compare to see what it looks like. 6 months is really not ideally enough time, but because we'll want to start to see and look at what it says. But we did just extend it for another 6 months, so it will be the full year that it will be going on at minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any more? Yes, Ms. Ruth.
In our board packet, I circled, under the category operating revenue, at the bottom it says other revenues, and there is a decrease of 1,906,000.
Can I ask, are you looking at the actual financial statements versus?
Yeah, so it's the one that's like laid out.
Yep, and what does it say at the top?
Statement of revenues, expenses, and change in net position.
Okay.
So other revenues decreased 1,906,000.
Mhm.
That just seems like a lot to be categorized as other.
Yep, you wanna know what that is? Our investments.
Oh, okay.
They're not doing well. As no one's
That's
right now.
everyone, yeah.
Yep, so that, we expect that to come back.
Okay.
It's just, it's swung a lot right now, so.
Got it, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
But a good question.
Yes.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next up on the agenda are board approval items for contracts. Mr. Franklin, Patrick, how are you, sir? Great, haven't seen you in a while. Yeah.
I'm here for board approval for 2 items. They're both facility contract items. First being the LJ Rose contract. Contract duration is through 6/30/2024. This is a HVAC maintenance contract increase and extension. Proposed contract amount, $143,000. The previous contract amount, $75,000. Scope of work is the not to exceed contract amount for 2 additional years. And we're adding $13,000 to the current year contract and plus 2 additional years to the contract. And this contract exceeds the 100,000 threshold, therefore we're bringing it before the board for approval.
Any questions? Actually, first I'll ask for a motion to approve this contract. Thank you. So we have a motion to approve and support. Now, is there any discussion on this? I do have one question for you as it relates to the duration. We said we're adding 2 years. What was the duration of the original contract?
The original contract was from 2019, so it was 3 years.
Okay.
Yes, previously 3 years.
Okay, so it's gone up by quite a bit.
Well, it didn't go up. It's consistent.
It is? Okay.
So we're adding another 2 years to the contract. We were over in the 3-year period, and that's why we're asking for the additional, adding $13,000 to that contract. What we found out is that when we changed vendors, in the early part of the contract, they're learning our system, they're getting familiar with our HVAC operations, and that's what happened. We noticed a higher spike in the cost of this contract, and it leveled out as the second and third year once they became completely familiar with how our system worked. So
classic experience curve kind of thing.
Exactly.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions from board members? And thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second, to approve this. All those, we do a roll call, don't we? All right, let's do a roll call to approve this motion.
Mr. Torres?
Yes.
Ms. Woodruff?
Yes.
Ms. May? Ms. Root? Yes. Mr. Cowan? Yes. Ms. Namie Dyer? Yes. Ms. Newman?
Yes.
Dr. Hans? Yes. Mr. Furman?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Landsman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. On to the next one.
Okay, the next, item is the vendor MCMI. This is the controls portion of our, HVAC system. The contract duration is through 6/30/2025, and this is the HVAC maintenance agreement for the air purification upgrade. The original proposed contract amount is $187,185, and we wanted to add an additional. The previous contract amount was $115,175. We wanted to add $72,000 to this contract for the air purification system. And that's what, it's an air scrubber similar to what hospitals and surgical rooms have, and it's part of the COVID air purification to make the building safe, and we feel comfortable and confident that we're doing all our due diligence to make our tenants and our staff and everyone who visits this building comfortable that we're concerned about them.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the MCMI contract?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Yvette. So motion by John, second by Yvette. Is there any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
So just to get this straight, the current contract of $115,000, is that the maintenance contract?
The LJ Rose contract that we originally approved prior to this one is the mechanical, compressor, boiler, pumps, etc. It's the physical piece of the mechanical, the HVAC contract.
Okay,
the MCI is the brains portion, if you will, the controls, and it's a small dollar amount. This is this contract was also started in 19, so it's only been roughly about $23,000 annually. But because we're taking extra precautions, we're adding $72,000 to upgrade the system to include this air purification to this existing contract.
Okay, so is this a one-time expense
It's
we're going to
a
incur?
one-time.
Okay, so we're not going to have a rolling $72,000 additional dollars? Okay,
This is one.
that's really what I wanted to get at.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? So if I understand it, the controls piece is sort of like the zones, making them turn on and off so that it's the same coldness that's in this room as in every room of the building, is that
correct?
And then this is the scrubber for the air?
The signals to the
Yeah.
boilers and the other
Okay.
units.
I'm still not going to take off my mask even with an air purifier. All right. If there's no more questions, then we'll do a roll call vote to approve the motion for MCMI.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Furman?
Yes.
Dr. Hans? Ms. Newman? Ms. Namie Dyer? Mr. Cowan? Ms. Root? Ms. May?
Yes.
Ms. Woodruff?
Yes.
Mr. Torres? Mr. Landsman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Next on the agenda would be the 6-month annual plan review. Francis Carley. Hello, Francis.
Hi, good evening. I'm Frances Carley, the Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives. And thank you for the opportunity to present on OCHN's progress to date on accomplishing the FY22 annual goals. So this is a chance for us to kind of take stock of the accomplishments to date, and then also to provide updates to the board on what to expect for the rest of the year. So while the overview provides some highlights of the work is still in progress. Some of the work is complete, but most of the work is still in progress. And then also, for reference, the board packet included a far more detailed report with details and updates by department. Could you go back one, please? Okay. Just quickly, an overview of the people who have been served to date. Our current unduplicated count is 21,344 people served. And in terms of the percentage breakdown for services, that's displayed here on the chart. And starting from the bottom of the chart, you'll see that approximately 50% of people served were adults with mental illness. And this group is followed by people with IDD at 17%, and then children with SED, and those receiving SED or crisis services were all around 10 to 12% of the people served. Next slide. So before going over the status of the goals in more detail, I'd like to start by presenting a few highlights on a few of the program areas over the past few months. So first is OCHN's ongoing COVID-19 response. And when OCHN developed the annual plan last year, it was uncertain how COVID was going to continue evolving and what the needs were going to be. So this is an overview of some of the work that the staff have been doing this year. First, we received a grant to provide weekly vaccination clinics with the SED providers, and to date, 161 people have been served, have been vaccinated, and we have held 24 clinics as of May 31st. Additionally, we received a different grant, and this allowed us to distribute 2,700 COVID tests to approximately a dozen providers within the network to continue monitoring and help their staff stay safe. Additionally, in terms of the vaccination rates, we are continuing to monitor that among the provider network. And our current data shows that 48% of adults with mental illness are fully vaccinated, and 65% of people with IDD are fully vaccinated. And in order to increase the numbers, we recently launched a joint project with some of the providers, with Oakland County, Genoa, and this was an also honor to vaccinate some of the people who are considered among the highest risk, and including people who are homebound. And as everyone knows, one of the key focus areas for OCHN this past year, which was outside of the annual planning process, but that definitely deserves a key kind of area, is the coordinated crisis response in Oxford. So since November 30th, OCHN has been working with the provider network, Oxford and Oakland schools, and Oakland County, and numerous other groups and organizations to address the needs in the community. So early on, that meant coordinating and deploying volunteers, and also some other mental health resources. And most recently, OCHN has worked with the County Board of Commissioners to provide Oxford students and families with up to $2,000 each in financial support for co-pays to help support ongoing and longer-term mental health needs in the community. And to date, we have received 143 requests. And it was important to the staff and the community to provide some more meaningful long-term support, even for those with insurance who wanted to receive counseling beyond the immediate crisis. Next slide. And so that kind of segues into another priority, which is the school mental health navigators. And this is a program that actually launched last year in August, and it's been developing. It received a big boost through a partnership with the county commissioners when it received funding in Q2. So the funding will support 4 mental health navigators stationed at schools to, and also a resource specialist to help connect families and children to services. And we've hired 3 out of 4 of the mental health navigators so far, and plan to operationalize all of the program components in the 22-23 school year. All right, and so in the interest of time, I think we can go over the next slides fairly briefly. So I believe everyone is familiar with the strategic priorities that are in place through the end of fiscal year 22. So we have these 6 key priority areas. And within that, in FY22, we have 32 annual goals and 159 objectives, which are more detailed and more measurable. So quickly, within administration and operations, that focus area, that includes some accreditation and value-based contracting with 61 objectives. And then advocacy, different goals for outreach and training, budget and finance, as Anya Eliason described, some of the priorities, stabilizing the network and addressing direct care wages. And within healthcare and wellness, that concerns some of the different models of care, such as the CCBHC and other health homes. Services and supports include services, direct services for justice, veterans, children, suicide prevention. And finally, technology and innovation. It addresses health IT, data exchange, and technologies to promote independence and well-being. So within these program areas and the impacts on people served, the slides contain some more detailed information. I will go through with maybe a broader brush, and then also please definitely refer to the report for some more detail. So first, the clinical goals and objectives. So far this year, the clinical goals have focused on integrated healthcare, expanding access to mental health supports and coverage. And currently, OCHN leads the state in behavioral health home enrollment with 797 active enrollees. And this is providing more extensive mental health needs for people with Medicaid, including primary care and social service supports. OCHN met the pay for performance measure for this, for increasing the number of beneficiaries. Additionally, the CCBHC model is currently serving over 12,000 individuals, and this is providing mental health coverage regardless of insurance, including mild to moderate care. It launched in October, and Easter Seals and CNS became certified CCBHCs in April. I think All right, we can move on to the next slide. And then some other examples of expanding program supports includes the launch of the Maternal Infant Mental Health Program, and also the Hope 365 Peer Respite and Wellness Center, which has served 50 guests since March. And finally, the clinical team is working with IT to explore some technology solutions so that they're able to access not only lab results, but other data that will help continuing to support an integrated care model and support the health homes and complex case management efforts. So I'll pause to see if there are any questions.
Board members? Yes, Ms. Woodruff.
When you talked about 143 people had applied for assistance for the copays, had submitted applications, are they automatically approved, or is there still an approval process after submitting?
I'm not sure about the process.
I can answer. Once they submit their information, our access team follows up to make sure they have all the documentation they need, and then it's reviewed and approved. If there's anything pending, it's because of missing documentations, receipts, or other information, and they follow up with the families. But so far, more than half of the families have been approved and already received their funding.
Did that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I may have one more question. And out of the ones that have been approved, are most of them for crisis services or for ongoing services?
It looks like ongoing outpatient services, and part of the issue, as you are aware, is that the staffing and the workforce available to see people, so sometimes it's taking a little longer than usual to access those services. So people who have been able to engage are submitting those receipts or asking for us to pay those copays and deductibles. So I think it's still going to be a challenge. We would have hoped that more families would have reached out and used the benefit, but it's coming along. I think the more people find out about it, the easier it'll be for people to us to push this through.
Thank you.
Other board member questions or comments? Okay.
Okay. So then next, for the substance use disorder services overview, notably, the SUD team has reached their goal to expand capacity this year by opening another medication-assisted treatment site in Pontiac. So the Oakland County now has 4 sites providing this important service. OCHN is also hiring a liaison to be embedded at the prosecutor's office to promote more diversion opportunities at the point of initial charge or sentencing and support linkage to services. And the SUD team, similar to the clinical team, has found opportunities for integration and expanded healthcare coordination by launching the SUD Health Home on April 1st. And this is through 3 providers within the network, Easter Seals, Oakland Family Services, and Sacred Heart. So currently, we're still in the first quarter of operations, and we'll have more information to report soon, hopefully. Next slide. And as I mentioned previously, the SUD team has a weekly vaccination clinic underway, and some women's specialty COVID services will be launching on July 1st. Then I think for highlights, with the Access team and Justice Services, I would note that for Access, the renovations for the Resource and Crisis Center location are underway, going well, as the last update I received, and In the meantime, Oakland Family Services, which is the contractor for the assessments, and for other services, they have begun to provide assessments in emergency departments until the RCC location is complete and ready to go. For justice, I would note that one of the key program updates is the co-responder program, which is a program where an OCHN clinician is called to the scene to respond with law enforcement to defuse and potential behavioral health-related incidents and connect people to services, working with the police departments in Birmingham, Bloomfield Township, and Auburn Hills. And Representative Haley Stevens recently provided $260,000 through a grant opportunity to OCHN for to add another co-responder and provide additional services. So that is underway as well. I will pause for any questions.
Yes, Malachi?
With the, going back to substance use disorders and the, partnering with Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, have they started doing any diversions, or is this still a plan that's getting ready to take place?
The liaison is in the process, we're in the process of hiring this person. So that is still underway, and I believe I can provide more information. Oh, Dana.
This is a program that currently already exists, and this is an additional staff person for a grant. It's funded by a grant we received to add on this additional liaison. So we're already working in the jail diversion programs, but this is expanding the work that we do.
Because we have drug court.
Yes,
So
mental
that
health
would
court.
be part of that program?
I will have to get back to you on that part, but I know we have the mental health court and the SUD court, but this prosecutor liaison is a part of one of those grants that expands it, so I'll get you more information on that and the details as well. But that's a new position.
Yes, John Paul.
Yeah, I just had a question, because I saw you had the mental health court on there. So is that something that we're actively involved with, or was it something that we helped with a grant? Is that what it was on the slide that was before this, I think before the questions? Assisted with grant application
Under
for
the
juvenile.
justice area, I believe.
Yeah, the juvenile mental health court. So is that something that, if we assisted with the grant application, then are we in any way part of that juvenile mental health court? I know they have a juvenile drug court with Oakland County, so I was just interested though, because the mental health courts are kind of the up and coming. So, but are we involved in that in any way, or?
I can look into those details
Yeah.
and provide a follow-up response.
Yeah, I just would like to know,
Okay.
if we're involved in any, because usually it's a bunch of partners involved in those specialty courts, so I don't know if we were funding any of it or involved in any way, so it'd be nice to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and just for a quick time check, there are quite a few other slides with an overview. I just wanted to pause to see how the board would like to proceed.
Maybe we can move through and then have
Sure.
questions at the end? Just
Yeah.
wait for questions until the very end. Might move
That sounds
faster.
good.
Okay. All right, I will kind of keep it high level then. And some of the key accomplishments of the legal team to date include implementing in the process of implementing a procurement and contract document management solution to manage procurement and contracting activities, promoting transparency and accountability within the public system, and also developing a bid schedule to help track and report more efficiently. And so 17 RFPs have been completed. 15 were released this year, 5 of which are still open, and the team currently has 248 non-service contracts, which includes MOUs and other types of agreements. Okay, and just a couple more updates. For the quality team, one of the main areas of work that the team has been focusing on is maintaining the Managed Behavioral Health Care Organization accreditation and through NCQA. And as part of that, they submitted the required documentation on time at the end of May and are preparing for the on-site review, which is scheduled for July 18th and 19th. Additionally, the team has been working with the network, in the provider network, to make sure that they are compliant with the home and community-based services rules, and to ensure compliance by March. And finally, they are working on a credentialing process for specialty providers to ensure that OCHN has the highest quality of services. And then finally, we have the training overview. So the training team is focused on cultivating a workplace culture, allowing employees to do their best work and grow their own talents, fostering a supportive environment with equity, inclusivity, and belonging. And as part of that, they held the Courageous Conversations, which lasted for a year and concluded in March. And in Q1 and Q2, the team completed 98 trainings for almost 4,000 peers, individuals served, providers, and others. And additionally, continued the crisis intervention team training for law enforcement, and finally is also working on the e-learning course for person-centered planning. So that concludes the main updates for goals and objectives so far.
So, other questions or comments from the board members? I had one. I saw that we're up for NCQA review or audit. That's in July. When will we know that we were passed and we retained or recertified?
That is a good question. Does anyone?
Marquita probably knows. And we feel really good and ready for it, because I know they can be really tough. Great. Other questions? So I want to thank you for sharing the current year and where we're at. I know it's a tough, dry subject sometimes, but you've done a great job with it, so thank you. And now we're moving into, and that was after, that's the current year with a reflection on a 4-year strategic plan. Now we're moving into it, back into our normal 3-year, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, floor is yours.
Okay, so next Christine will join me. So I'll present the outline for the FY 23-25 strategic plan and the process that we've had to date with Christine Burke, the Director of Communications and Outreach. So for an overview, kind of a quick recap, the needs assessment process concluded April 18th, and we provided the final report to the board May 9th. Now we're in the process of taking that information and then developing the strategic plan and annual goals using the information that we gathered from the surveys. The outline for the strategic plan, so this is really a work in progress. It's where we are right now, it's in a draft form, and what we will be presenting in July will be the draft report. So this outline is really one step in the process. It's more of a high-level overview, and the draft report will include address some of the needs assessment results, some of the key findings and takeaways, which you see on the slide currently. And then next slide, please. It will also included in the outline and final report will be some common themes, such as the workforce shortages, and then any opportunities and strengths that were noted in the assessment. Some of the environmental data and kind of overview of the broader circumstances. We'll be able to look at some of the health indicators that are specific to Oakland County, such as the strengths and challenges. This is through the ECHO County data, so this is available online. And next slide. So the structure of the strategic plan and annual goals. So just as an orientation, we are looking at a few key focus areas to start. Kind of the key points that our CEO, Dana Lassenby, drives home as the main priorities, and then building from there on broader strategic goals that really look across departments and are more of the high-level vision statements with broad outcomes in mind. So that is the point where we're at right now. These two areas have been developed in draft form, and we are moving on to the more specific kind of annual goal development and objectives, which will be the more detailed, measurable results.
Just as a reminder to the board too, so the board was given the opportunity to participate in the needs assessment to make sure that you're engaged in that process. And the strategic plan itself, Francis is leading with the chief leadership, who then are working closely with their directors to make sure that there's true collaboration, that we're identifying and being responsive to the needs assessment. So the process will be comprehensive and detailed and will reflect the input of the board, our staff, our network, and the people we serve.
Okay, and so then the key focus areas that we've identified, first is staffing and retention. Second is quality system of care, which more broadly encompasses crisis and access services and services for children and families. Third is administration and service delivery. Fourth is integrated healthcare, and fifth is partnerships, advocacy, and outreach efforts. So the first item, staffing and retention, the two key strategic goals within this area, develop and maintain a qualified behavioral health workforce, and develop and maintain a diversity, equity, and inclusion-based hiring and retention strategy. The second area, quality system of care. The first kind of key broad area is to enhance the children's system of care to ensure timely access to coordinated care for all eligible children and adolescents in Oakland County, and then to evaluate, expand, and improve crisis and non-crisis services to meet identified needs. The third area for administration and service delivery, strengthen the provider network and community partnerships, expand value-based contracting, evaluate and implement administrative efficiencies to increase ease of access to services, and then expand technological solutions to improve service delivery. The fourth area of integrated care is to increase care coordination across the OCHN system of care. That can include the various areas of clinical departments and divisions, whether that's clinical or SED, and then also ensure equitable utilization of and services by diverse populations, improve the social determinants of health for individuals receiving services through OCHN as well. And then finally, the partnerships, advocacy, and outreach area would focus on improving OCHN's identity and affiliation branding, and then strengthening community partnerships with key stakeholders to expand community outreach and services. So from there, these are kind of broad strokes, the high-level vision statements. The next step is to build out the more specific program goals and the annual goals to make the overall, the higher level vision, I guess, more sticky and get into the implementation and more operational aspect of that. In terms of the timeline, the draft will be presented during the study session on July 28th, and we would like to request feedback on these, the initial outline by July 15th if possible, so that any changes can be incorporated. Thank you.
Board questions? So I noticed a big difference from the prior strategic plan to this one, which is really, I hate to say it, but really nice. So instead of 13 areas, 6 areas, instead of what seems to be 1,000, I know it's probably only 150 or so goals. Roughly how many goals do we think we'll have as part of this coming strategic plan?
I'm not sure. At this point, we are in a process of discussing what should be included in an annual plan versus a departmental work plan. And so we are in that process of kind of piecing through.
Some of that, too, is intentional, I think, in Dana's direction and with ensuring that the goals and objectives are attainable with measurable outcomes. So that is really what you're seeing in the difference, to be more intentional, less broad, high level, but very specific so that you can identify the impact. Is it a percentage that was a goal? Is there a change in number of calls, so that there's more meaning to the plans themselves and to the goals and the objectives?
So a sharper, tighter focus.
A sharper focus.
With clear outcomes, which is what we're trying to get to.
With tangible and reportable outcomes.
I love it. So thank you, guys. Other questions or comments? All right, thank you guys so much for presenting that.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda are consent agenda items. So there's no discussion on these, but you can see that we have a number of them for the consent agenda. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second?
Support.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. So motion by Mr. Cowan, second by Ms. Newman, and we'll do a roll call vote to approve.
Mr. Young? Mr. Furman,
Yes.
Dr. Hans, Ms. Newman,
Yes.
Ms. Namie Dyer,
Yes.
Mr. Cowan,
Yes.
Ms. Root,
Yes.
Ms. May, Ms. Woodruff,
Yes.
Mr. Torres,
Yes.
Mr. Landsman.
Yes. So the motion for the consent agenda
Carries.
carries. Thank you. For other business, we have an update on HCBS. Hello, Marquita.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Marquita Massey. I'm the Director of Quality and Regulatory Compliance here at OCHN. I want to give you a brief overview of where we are with home and community-based services, standards and compliance, specifically to the heightened scrutiny process. The state has been the entity that's been entirely responsible for the heightened scrutiny process. Back in 2014, CMS introduced standards that they call it the Home and Community-Based Services Standards, that were basically introduced to ensure that individuals served have the same freedoms that any one of us may have to come and go from your home as you please, to have free access throughout your home, to be able to choose your supports, to be able to be integrated into the community. And one of the primary facets of the home and community-based services rules was to ensure that settings were not institutional-like and that they were not isolative in nature. The heightened scrutiny status that a setting may be assigned is an indication that there were some red flags that led the state to assess the site as being in heightened scrutiny. As I mentioned, this has been handled totally by the state, so PIHPs have not had any role in assessing the providers for this. If a site has been determined to be on heightened scrutiny, CMS requires that there be a public comment process. So the public comment process is open for 30 days, and it's an opportunity for all stakeholders to weigh in on whether or not a site is, from reviewing the documentation that is provided, it's persons that are completing the surveys are able to determine if they can weigh in whether or not they feel that a site is institutionalized or isolative. So the way it's going to work is that there will be a survey that individuals and interested stakeholders can link to on the state's website. By going to the website and accessing that information, what a person would see is documentation that was collected during the state's assessment process. So you'd be looking at documents such as community outing logs, the types of activities persons are engaging in, how often are people getting out into the community, if their home is in a location that is close to stores and churches and other community centers. The following the review of that information, then once you've done that, the individual would be able to answer yes or no to each of the questions in the survey. And there's also going to be a comment box that persons that are completing the survey would be able to add any additional information. It's, for Oakland, we have about 63 settings that were identified initially as being in heightened scrutiny. This has come down significantly from when the heightened scrutiny flags were first placed on provider sites. I think at that time we probably had a couple of hundred. 63 sites, 25 providers this involves. So what's really important is that when the survey process opens up, it's very important that all interested stakeholders complete the survey. The state is not interested in moving individuals from their settings, but they also have to ensure that the setting is home and community-based compliant. So the information that is gathered through the surveys, the staff at the state will be reviewing that information, and they'll use that information to determine whether or not a site is HCBS compliant. We don't know exactly when the survey is going to open. We've been told that it's going to open probably June 22nd through the 24th. And as I mentioned, we'll have a 30-day time frame for folks to be able to weigh in to complete the survey. We've communicated this information to our provider network. We'll be working directly with our communications team so we can get the word out to all interested parties and family groups and advocacy groups so individuals can weigh in on their opinions as to whether or not a site is institutionalized or isolating. So again, the main takeaways, and we wanted to come to the board just to make you aware of this, is because this is very important. Because a provider that is not compliant with the home and community-based services standards, that provider will no longer be able to receive Medicaid funding March of 2023. And this was extended from March of 2022 due to the pandemic. And that is really all I have to say on that.
Questions from board members?
One question.
Yeah.
Are most of the ones that are on the list, is it because of health and safety?
I wouldn't say it is because of health and safety. Some of it has been because when the surveys were completed, in fact, several years ago, there was some misanswering of questions. It wasn't totally clear. For example, one of the questions may have said, do you provide a continuum of care at your setting? So a provider completing the survey would say, oh, we do that. We give a person everything that they need. And that would have been the wrong answer, because that's basically is alluding to the fact that the person does not get out into the community. Everything is happening in that site. So, and that's not what is considered community integration.
Gotcha.
Other questions? Thank you for the update, Marquita. I did have a question. I know we had 63 that you said, and I remember how long the list was before that. And I remember how long this has been going on because, like you said, I think we were in the old building when they first talked about this. And we've been here a long time already. And you mentioned that we've been actively trying to help people prepare for the surveys. When the survey window opens, are we going to do the outreach to these 63 sites to help make sure people answer the question, that people do the surveys during that period? And then as well, I know no one really wants to see a site close because they've misunderstood the terminology or what's expected in the survey. Has the state improved their definitions so it becomes clear how people should answer the questions in the survey?
The state has done some remediation. So basically, that's how our list was reduced from a couple of hundred to where it is now. They have not reissued the survey, but they did do the remediation one of the areas that they looked at was if a setting was located on the site of an institution. So they were able to confirm whether or not that was true through Google Map images. So they were able to take a bunch of sites off from that. So, the state has been implementing some efforts, but we still have some that are still on the list that we really are going to have to make sure as many persons as possible participate in that public comment process. Region 5, which is Mid-State, they were the pilot site that went under this process, and they were open for public comment from April the 8th through May the 11th. And I haven't seen the survey, but I understand from the staff at Mid-State that it's pretty straightforward and it's simple for folks to complete.
Okay. Do we have any facilities or sites where they've just closed up shop? They don't want to deal with this? And we've had to deal with...
we have had some sites that have closed, and those have been subtracted from our initial couple of hundred. But most of our providers, they want to come into compliance, and it's not impossible. Right. I think a lot of it is just changing some behaviors.
Because I worry and I'm concerned about the hardship it places on the people we serve, where they're living and their living conditions. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up are board committee reports, and we'll start with bylaws.
So, I think you've all been part of bylaws at this point. There's not much to report out from the committee, aside from the fact that we did approve a portion of the red line board policies this evening, then went through and reviewed the portions on the ethics, and we will be in the future as a committee discussing whether we will have one more meeting to put forth the final red line version of the board policies for the board to review, and then at the COW meeting of this month, and then with the idea, or the COW meeting in July, and then with the purposes of, if things are in place, to put forth the board policies and the board bylaws to the entire board for a vote at the meeting in July. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Recipient rights, Christina?
I actually have one question for John Paul. I have a little suggestion based on a part we reviewed today. Would it be appropriate for me to email it, or should I wait until the next time we discuss?
Yeah, you should wait till the next time, because we want to discuss it in public.
Together, okay.
So if you see it, just note it, and then when we do the red line, you can make the suggestion then.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so for the RAC, our meeting was held here in Troy on June 2nd, 4 p.m. We had a presentation from Mark Friedman and David Taylor about mentoring efforts, and learned that Michigan has one of the best mentor programs in the country. Our member highlight of the month was Elizabeth Martin, and she gave us a wonderful snapshot of her life. She even had a display table set up right over there in the room of various items that she had created through her business, Elegant Designs by Elizabeth. And then Ms. Suter gave us a Rights Director update and shared that the Your Voice, Your Values Conference will be held in August, where Achievement Award winners will be announced. And I did see that our May Stepping Stones newsletter included the nomination form, so I'm hoping we'll get a good amount. In the rights manager update, we were informed that the department is fully staffed, which is great news. We also reviewed action steps for the RAC's third goal of 2022 and read 2 recipient rights policies titled Right to Access Printed Material, Audio and Video, and Treatment by Spiritual Means. Lastly, our site visit report stated that 226 sites have been visited out of the decreased required number of 420. So previously it was 427. Our next meeting will be held Thursday, August 4th. And that's it.
Thank you. And yes, you guys don't meet in July, do you? Okay. CAC, Rena.
Yes, the CAC met on Wednesday, June 15th at 9:30. I was actually only in attendance for the first portion of it, and during that time, Ms. Lazenby had given her director's report, which she will be giving today. So that's actually all I have on the CAC.
All right, thank you. And then we have the CEO of Val.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you. Jonathan actually put together this nice timeline for us for the CEO Evaluation Committee. So the 360 survey has been sent out. That was sent out last month, and the plan is on the June 30th board study session for us to review the results of the 360, as well as for Ms. Lesenby to do a self-evaluation for the board, and for us to discuss that and for her to provide any other documentation or information that she would like us to consider. After that meeting, the board survey will be distributed by Edna to all board members, and that will have a due date of July 12th. And after that, or during that time, the board will be reviewing all of the documentation or the materials provided, and then completing that CEO evaluation survey as well. Between July 13th and the 18th, we will be completing the CEO matrix and aggregating. During that time, Edna will be aggregating all of our surveys. And then on July 19th, the CEO Evaluation Committee will be meeting prior to the board meeting, in which we will review the aggregated matrix results and then determine any potential bonuses. We will meet with the CEO and prepare a motion for the CEO. Prepare a motion to provide to the board for full board approval on our recommendations in terms of bonus and increases to salary. And then at that board meeting is when we will present that to the rest of the board, where we will all discuss and determine the bonus, meet with the CEO, and prepare that bonus motion. Any questions?
Thank you. And so that's the reason why it's important for the full board to be at this upcoming board study session next Thursday. All right, thank you. Next is the director's report. You have the floor, Dana.
Good evening again, and thank you for your patience. We know it was a long meeting, but it's for a good cause. So last Monday, the normal time we would have had our COW meeting, we actually were recognized by the Detroit Tigers, and we had about 5 or 6 board members with their loved ones join us for that game. So that was nice and exciting to see our name on the big screen and be acknowledged for our work in Oxford. We also today actually received a recognition from Oakland County Sheriff's Office signed by Sheriff Bouchard. He also was recognizing our work in response to the tragedy in Oxford. So that was exciting and a big surprise for us. It has been a very busy month, so I'll go very quickly about the conferences I attended. The first is the American Psychiatric Association Conference, which is a national conference, and they go over their annual report, and they also focus on the concepts and ideas that they want to promote and support. And this year, the focus was on social determinants of health. Actually, they also focused on DEI efforts as well. And very honored to present to you that our Dr. Posios was actually appointed to a prestigious role as Speaker-elect for the APA, which is a big deal, as well as our CNS Healthcare, Dr. Michelle Reed's CMO, she's a CMO for CNS. She was also elected or reelected as the trustee at large. So these are very big opportunities for us to have advocates on a national level. So it's exciting that I was able to go and witness their accomplishments, but also really look at how we strategize and use those connections that we now have through attending that conference. So Dr. Posios will be very busy. He also was chosen to serve on the Oakland County Prosecutors Commission to address gun violence in our community. So he's really a very valuable member of our leadership team, and he's doing some amazing things to push our efforts to support this community. The second conference was an Mackinac Policy Conference, and I always see our board member, Mr. Cohen, there serving up ice cream. So it's always nice to see him and really watch how we navigate and network with various community people, business people, and it was fun to have Anya, our CFO, and Bernard, our Chief Corporate Compliance and DEI Officer. We were calling ourselves the Dream Team, made a lot of great connections in terms of advocating for the public mental health system. We all took an opportunity every time we saw the Lieutenant Governor to get in his way and talk to him about the legislation that's being pushed forward. He gave us a verbal assurance. You know, I like to see things in writing, but he gave us a verbal assurance that we had nothing to worry about. But again, I like to see things in writing. And from there, we went to the Community Mental Health Summer Conference. Was another opportunity for us to really work with our colleagues across the state and hear updates from the association. And our own board chair, Mr. Jonathan, is going to serve in the role as our Metro Region president or board chair. I can't remember the exact title, but he was reappointed in that area, and then we actually, a group of us got reassigned or appointed to various committees, which is good. A lot of work, but it's a good work. And of course, Ms. Malkia Newman actually was reappointed to her role as well. And finally, I hate to end with bad news, but it just is hopefully inspire you to advocate for the public system. We know last week Senator Shirkey was able to pass Senate Bill 714, and this is funding. It's a funding bill, but it also is, I learned a new term, tied to the passing of Senate Bill 597 and 598, which really are, again, those privatization bills. And so the reason 714 looks good is that it provides funding, but it's tied to whether or not the passing of the Senate Bill 597 and 598 get approved. So the issue becomes this is a one-time funding, it's ARPA dollars, and it's only select providers that would receive these dollars. So again, it doesn't talk about sustainability, it doesn't talk about what it does to support the entire network and the entire system for people receiving public mental health services. So again, we need to make sure that we advocate against privatization and then also look for other things that are coming up, and that would include the House bill supported by Senator Whiteford, or Representative Whiteford, I'm apologizing. So we still have a lot of work to do on the advocacy side, and I'm not sure if we shared the video. I know we talked about it, but I think it would be important if we can share that video and maybe even watch it at one of our meetings. And I encourage you to share it on any social media that you may have, but also with any of your colleagues, because the way this Senate Bill 714 was introduced was one moment it was nothing on the agenda, next moment it was there on the agenda and passed. And part of the strategy, I think, is to get the legislation and the situation where who can say no to funding mental health programs and services. So it looks good on the surface, but as you look into it a little deeper, it really is not good for the entire system, especially if it's tied to the passing of Senate Bill 597 and 598. Now, if they can untie it, great, but it doesn't look like that would be the route that they will want to take. So that's all I have. If there are any other questions about the report, I do want to thank Frances Carley. She took a lot of time in our strategic plan, and I know it takes a lot of time, but we definitely wanted to present something that was really tied to outcomes and the vision of what we want to see for this community.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Any questions for Executive Director? I would just say that we had heard months ago that there was the possibility that they would offer up a lot of money out there, but with the caveat, if you say yes to that, you're going to have to say yes to these other items, and it's a poison pill. So, so we'll see what happens. Maybe at lame duck. Hopefully, nothing. All right, at this point, last chance for public comment. Is there anyone online?
Yeah, I'm gonna,
Good evening.
Suzanne.
Yes.
Sorry.
You have 5 minutes or less, so please.
Actually, this is Suzanne Weiner, and I am attending the meeting virtually today, but we do have 2 comments from the online forum that I'll read for the individuals and for the board. I believe the first comment may have been cut off on the forum, so I'll read it in its entirety during this opportunity. And this was from Rosemary Rangi. She asked that the facilitator read it. Please support additional funding for direct support workers that would increase their starting pay to $18 per hour. The work they do is invaluable for those who care for our loved ones. It's very demanding and hard work at times and needs to be promoted as a career path similar to that of nursing or nurse assistant. There would be more interest if promoted as such. There is a huge need for respite for families. My son is 42 years old, and since he was young, Oakland Community Health Network has offered this same service, Lasser Respite, for children and adult version. The capacity is only 6 beds, and individuals who stay have not had aggressive behaviors. Those who stay at the same time need to be compatible. For 5 years, I worked as a patient support partner, and this was one of the #1 needs for families with children with severe, demanding medical and behavioral challenges. Having been there myself, it was very difficult not having any options available for caregivers. I did not have either family or friends that could help. It was especially challenging for my other children not having me able to meet their needs since my son was so challenging. I would like to see OCHN invest in providing other options for respite before families get into crisis situations. And that is the end of that first comment. The second public comment, the person also requested the facilitator read, and this is from Douglas Wolf. And it reads, our 15-year-old son has been on the SED waiver for 4 years. He has a handful of mental health diagnoses, most particularly reactive attachment disorder, or RAD, Asperger's, high-functioning autism, and PTSD, and proverbial trauma, one of the most difficult things to treat. We have only twice received CLS services for a few months at a time in the 4 years. The past year and a half, he's been at Hillside Psychiatric Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and Schultz Lewis private pay residential placement in Indiana due to a lack of support and facilities for his needs. The community health services and lack of residential treatment centers are not adequate. He was unexpectedly discharged from Schultz Lewis at the end of January. Since then, because no community support is in place, he and we may not be safe in the home, so we rented an apartment where I, the husband, stay with him to keep the family spread out. There are 3 other children in the family. It has taken from February to the middle of June to get even close to a CLS worker. The pay is not enough to attract workers. Last Tuesday, after our wraparound meeting, our wraparound coordinator through OCHN texted that he will no longer be our son's coordinator and he was moving. We waited to hear from either OCHN or Oakland Family Services or OFS about what the plan is. Yesterday, my wife finally called OFS and asked about it, and they were not even aware that he was no longer the coordinator. No one from OCHN contacted them, according to OFS. This is yet another example that it is always one thing or another that shows community mental health services are broken. Our family is split apart in order to keep our son and us safe. My wife and I are absolutely burnt out from secondary PTSD and constant pouring up efforts to keep him going, and we are not getting the support we need from community mental health to keep him in the community. The mention of PTSD in this meeting should also include CPTSD. The ongoing hypervigilance and stress and trauma is harming our health and mental state significantly. The immediate action that could be taken is to provide higher pay for CLS and respite, provide equine therapy, consistent caseworkers that are experienced in dealing with trauma, somatic therapy, and will stick around and not get moved around. And that's the end of the public comment.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there any other public comment that's here in the building? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to board comment. We'll go around the room. We'll start with you, Yvette, if you have any comment. Okay. Rena? John Paul?
Just to address the question from earlier that Christina had, if you make any corrections on it, then we'll do like I did today, where we redline. We had the redline version, and I made the correction on the date. So if everybody adopts it, we can accept it, and then accept the full bylaws from there. No other comments. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen? Christine? Okay. And I just want to take a moment and say thank you to Hadass for serving, Shaka for presenting, Francis, Marquita, Patrick, and Bernard, and Anya, and Christine for all of your efforts, and our CEO as well for sharing and taking time. I knew this was going to be a long meeting, but we got through it, covering stuff from study and from the cow, as well as our normal material. So thank you all for hanging in there. So Victoria, thank you. Sheila, thank you. And I'll look for a motion to go into adjournment. Thank you. Second? Thank you. Anyone opposed? Then we are adjourned.